Hey everyone, if you want to get seated, we'll get started shortly.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. I'm sorry to be a little bit late. We would have started on time, but we were having such a good time talking, we forgot what time it was. I'm David DeBord. I'm Sarah's dad and the self-appointed person to lead this. I did that myself because I wanted to and she wanted me to. So we welcome you here. Feel free to spread out more if you want to. I was a pastor at one point in my life, and we always say when there was a very small crowd at church, we'd spread them out so I could report to my peers that we were comfortably full on Sunday morning. So that meant that people could actually lay down. Everybody had room to lay down, and so we were comfortably full. So I wasn't lying. But we're glad you're here, and we have a nice showing. We don't know how many people are coming with us live streaming. It's also going to be, once we're through here, the recording. Jeffrey, our very kind person monitoring all the electronic stuff, which I'm glad he's doing it and not me. We're going to have these kind of things happening all the time, and so we're just let it lay down so it doesn't blow again. I won't blow away. I'm anchored. I have enough ballast to hold me in place. The thing that we're going to do is we're going to kind of take a journey. The theme of all of this is a celebration of life. About a month before she died, I came up and spent a long weekend with Sarah and Doug and Kyle and his family. And Sarah and I basically just stayed together. I stayed in her room. I slept in her room. I was with her. Doug took care of us as he did everything else as well. And one of the things that being a former pastor, I started the conversation, what do you want to happen? Do you want a service? And she said, I don't really care. I'm not going to be there. So I don't care what you do. If you do anything, you don't even have to do anything. She was already pre-decided that she was leaving her body to the University of Minnesota's medical school in the cancer research area. Obviously, she was a very rare case. She was one of the few people who lived 8.5 years after being diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. And that was, we all know, she lived for two things because she was a fighter. She refused to be identified as a victim. She said, I'm not a cancer victim. I'm a person who has cancer. So big difference in how sometimes people identify it. But that was her. The other was she was committed, and her boys know this, that I discovered as Doug and I were beginning to sort through things after she died about papers and things. And we fortunately, I'll tell you a little bit about this later, but I realized when she kind of decided that she was done, and that's literally what she said. She called me one afternoon. She said, Dad, I'm done. I'm tired. The last trial got closed by COVID. I'm ready to die. I want to die. And I just want to let you know I'm going into hospice tomorrow. So I said, okay. The other thing about this service is we're going to laugh and we're going to cry, and I might do that. I have my handkerchief, so I'm prepared. I gave my daughters right here, Esther and Hannah, a handkerchief. My wife is not going to watch us live. She wants to watch. She has some company, so she's going to watch it later. It will be put on YouTube. She'll send us, Jeffrey will send us the link. Doug and I will get that out. so people could watch it later. You might want to watch it again. But the thing that we realized is it's just going to be a kind of a fun, unstructured thing because that's the way Sarah would want it to be. Now, once she found out we were going to do something, she didn't care what we were going to do, but then she got interested and kind of took over, as predictable as that would be. And so she and I began talking about what would a service like this look like. And so we wanted it to be a celebration, not a cry, sad time, because that's not what she wanted. She wanted it to be a celebration of life, of her life. I mean, she didn't, those were my words. And so we structured this whole thing to be just that. All of you, in one way or another, had some association with Sarah at some point in her life. Her mom and I have association with her life from the day she was born at 9.5 pounds and moved forward. There's a whole bunch of cute baby pictures back there of how she grew. And so from that standpoint, we're going to kind of walk a little bit down memory lane. I hope it doesn't get too boring. A couple of the people who had agreed to do something can't be here. I have what they wanted to say, and I hope you just listen to what I say and don't get tired of hearing my voice. But we're going to, that's kind of the format. The path we're going to take is basically the period birth through high school. And I'm going to be reading a letter by her mom, Jane DeBord, who is in Virginia Beach and has medical reasons why she couldn't be here. But we did ask her to write something, and she did that. And then my wife, Connie, couldn't be here because of some physical issues, and she also wrote a letter. And most of these are remembrance letters, remembering things about Sarah, because we want you to know Sarah from beginning to end. By the time you leave here, if you loved her, you're going to love her even more, because she was quirky from the time she was born. And then Esther, my now oldest daughter, is going to read the letter from her mom that was written to Sarah, and then she has a few words that she wants to say, and then I'm just going to speak briefly about 2 or 3 things that are kind of funny because that will be spending a lot of time on that period of her life. We're then going to move to college, and Leslie Schinkel, who is her college friend, is going to tell us a few really wild stories about college times. I don't know too much about that. I thought she was off at a nice Christian school and was doing a great 4-year job, and told an adult friend of ours who would take her out to lunch every so often. And I had lunch with him. I was talking about what a great person Esther was, or I'll do that all day, but right here, Sarah was, and how she was really, doing good things and was a good Christian girl. And he just kind of laughed at me. He said, "David, you don't have a clue. You just keep believing what you want to believe." So I did, and I made it through college without having to know too much. And then after college, after Leslie talks about that, came a time in Sarah's life when she wanted to go out and do her own thing and basically separated from me and Connie. We, by that time, had moved to California. That's why she was there. We didn't have hardly any contact with her. I knew she was okay because she was in contact with a friend of mine on a weekly basis, and that friend never would tell me what they talked about, but she would always say, "She's okay, no problem. She's just sorting out her life." So that was good, but in that process, she ended up staying with Leslie and Jeffrey White, a couple who had a location business, and Leslie couldn't be here either. She's in Charlottesville and had some issues with building a new house. They got abandoned by the builder and all that, so she's kind of trapped there. But she wrote also her thoughts to Sarah about what Sarah meant to her life and to her family's life. And then after that, she's going to do college to marriage. Then Kyle is going to take care of marriage to family to cancer. That's the way I entitled it. Marriage to kids to cancer. So he's going to talk about Sarah from his perspective as husband and father. And then at the end, near the end, Aaron Peterson is going to talk about colon cancer, Sarah. The reason many of you are here is because Sarah touched hundreds of thousands of people, I think, by her life, by what she said, her colon cancer blog, which was an incredible writing of some 150-something episodes, I think, where she was I call her a Southern satirist. She saw the funny stuff in life and wrote about it in a sarcastic, upfront, in-your-face way. which made her real popular. And then Doug is going to come and talk about the last 2 or 3 years of her life with him as they tried to cram as much life as they could into a short period, which they didn't know what that period was. So he's going to kind of bring us to an end on that. So with that said, and feel very comfortable to stand up, walk around, stretch if you need to. If it goes too long, be like my wife in church. If I got going too long on a sermon, she would just kind of rub her throat like this, and I would know I needed to stop because I was done. I just didn't know I was done. So in this first letter that I want to read, Jane writes from her perspective as Sarah's mom. Gave her birth. She had an older brother, John, who is not here. And Jane is also an educator. She's a specialist in special ed, hearing impaired children, was a teacher for many years and an administrator. So you'll understand the things that she noticed about Sarah, because she did it as not only a mom, but as a teacher. So Jane starts, as parents, we are given the opportunity to raise children. It is one of the highest callings a person can receive. That rare gift to be able to nurture a child into independent adult is beyond measure one of the joys of our time on this earth. Sarah was the second of 2 children born to our family. As we soon discovered, she was a very unique presence in the life of the community that helped to raise her. Her precocious development and the unfolding of all the many facets of her personality amazed all who spent time with her. The verbal ability she demonstrated astonished even the most seasoned adult. At 6 months, she was producing very distinct 1- and 2-word utterances. At 2 years, her sentences were lengthy and complex. This innate language ability helped her master the English language with astonishing speed. She very quickly learned that language was a way to express all the thoughts, ideas, and opinions in her inner being. Many of these opinions left adults with wounded egos. For example, at 2.5 years, to her mom trying on bathing suits, Sarah said, "Well, I certainly know why you don't wear a bikini." And Jane's thought at that point was, well, it could be because you weighed 9.5 pounds at birth. At 2.5 years of age, she also commented to our nanny, a lady in our church who was just a great person. She said, "Jane, we have a problem. While waiting on the train today, Sarah named all of the states by the outline of their shapes on the sides of the boxcars. She's too young to know that. I once heard a guy who added up all the numbers on a train and could tell you when the train finished, and he never missed it. But Sarah knew the states at 2.5. At 3.5, Sarah, in response to her older brother, put together a puzzle of the United States, said, "Mom, why doesn't John know the names of the capitals of the states yet? He's 6. He should know that. I know the capitals at 3. Does it sound like Sarah? Jane continues, to the amazement of the adults in her life, the saga of her remarkable intellectual language and artistic accomplishments continued. Even the arts were no challenge for her. She had the ear for perfect pitch and could play the piano with no music. She found formal piano lessons too boring because they involved learning to read music. This natural musical ability led to viola lessons at school. Additional time with a viola tutor, first chair symphony status, would send him into awe because of the potential she demonstrated with the instrument. With the emergence of all these multiple talents, Sarah found interacting with her young peers to be a challenge. She would try to interact with them on their level. One had to give her a hug and a tear for trying. The village, mainly our church family, since I was the pastor, that was so important in helping to raise her instinctively discovered ways to help build a social framework to enable her to be a well-rounded child. Watching her play creatively with her peers became a blessing for all. The time she spent with her maternal cousins became a place where she could be loved and accepted for just being Sarah. Although these occasions were rare due to distance, it was a time of joy for her. Being Sarah's mother is one of the supreme blessings of my life. Thank you for helping to empower her to become one who challenges others to be who they are destined to be, to love and to give of self to all humanity. And that was written by her mom, Jane. Now, my daughter Esther is going to come and read some words from her mom, my second wife, Connie, Esther and Hannah's mom. And so Esther, if you'll come up, she's going to share what Connie wrote and sent us, and then some comments for herself.
All right. Sweet Sarah, you were such a handful as a teenager. You were very excited about living life to the fullest and determined to squeeze every ounce of adventure out of every day. I remember when you were just 16 and we considered moving to New York City, how you started planning your Soho wardrobe, all black, of course. Your disappointment when we decided against that move was short-lived because we ended up going to California instead. You were an instant hit in your new high school, and in order, you had a wonderful group of friends and were enjoying California living. We had so many great adventures as we settled there that I know meant a lot to you. You loved being part of Harvest Rock Church, insisted on becoming Kylie's primary babysitter, and found great comfort in our tight-knit family with the Moseses and the Maharajas. Ultimately, being in California led you to your dearest friendships, your marriage, and your precious ones. So it certainly turned out to be the right move for your future. You were such a fierce warrior. It's still hard for me to accept that you have left us now. I really got used to you fighting and winning. I loved your blogs and articles and seeing how your mind was working through this unexpected curveball. When reading them, I often reminded myself how prescient I was to recognize your prowess with the English language. I'm so glad I fished those high school essays out of the trash. I always knew you were a budding Eudora Welty, and I love being right about this. Throughout your journey with this despicable disease, I see how your stubbornness, that used to drive me crazy, kept you in the fight so much longer than many. The Lord never lets his gifts go to waste. I have a birthday card you sent me while you were still in college that I treasure to this day. It landed right after you headed back to school one year. I remember you were being a bit of a pain in the you-know-what right before you left. Imagine that. So I was surprised to get a card at all, but then when I read it, I sat down and cried. I still have it put away in my little box of specials keepsakes. You may not even recall writing it, but it meant so much to me. You thanked me for all the little things I did for you, and you literally started listing them from our earliest days together. I honestly did not realize you had even noticed half of it. So to see you fill both sides of a card with so many and say thank you grabbed my heart and got me through tougher times that were coming. Along with my asking you how you wanted to decorate your room to making you lunch every day, you even thanked me for insisting on curfews and setting boundaries when you first moved in with us. Honestly, I was shocked you realized at still a young age, how important those things were to you. I am so glad I saved that card, and I will treasure it even more in the future. We've been through a lot together. I tried to be a good stepmom, even though I didn't have a clue what I was doing. We all know that I did not always succeed. You didn't name me Wicked Stepmom, or as you affectionately called me, WSM, for nothing. But we certainly had some very good times as a family. I have been so gratified to see what a wonderful mom you have been to your boys. Even though your marriage did not work out, you and Kyle co-parented well, and the boys are in good hands with Kyle and Allison. He is a good man, and so in that respect, you chose well and can leave assured that the boys will fulfill their God-given destinies and always live in a loving and supportive home. I can't wait to see what they will accomplish. I know it will be great. Finally, the most important thing of your life is that you loved Jesus. I know your faith was not always in the forefront of your busy life, but I was not surprised to see you return to the hymns and favorite psalms of your youth as you knew you were leaving this earth. He was your first love. He is the beginning and the end. And the instant you saw him, you were transformed and in a perfect body, free of pain and disease, and ready for eternity. Now I have some thoughts. Sarah was my big sister. I came into her life when she was in college. What I can remember is the handwritten letters I got in the mail after we moved from Pasadena to Virginia Beach. She still wanted to be a part of my milestones, like losing my first baby teeth. When she came to live in Virginia Beach, I remember her inspiring me to listen to Les Miserables, her favorite musical. My local theater camp did productions of Les Miserables, and I got to participate. Eventually, Sarah got to see me play Cosette. Subsequent birthday gifts included tickets to see the 25th anniversary concert in theaters and a pendant with text from the original novel by Victor Hugo. When it came to gifts, Sarah really knew how to deliver. Even though Sarah moved away to Minnesota, she still kept in touch with us sisters. We got to celebrate her 40th birthday in Charlottesville, where I got to go to my first ever wine tasting. We had a fun time together. That's another key quality of Sarah's. She knew how to have a great time. Sarah was always the life of the party and knew how to get people to open up. She was always honest and spoke her mind. I will miss her and am thankful she is in a much better place without pain or suffering. Thank you.
Hey, Leslie will now come and share some of the college days, which I'm interested to hear.
She was fine, David. She was in good hands. Thank you. So, thank you all for being here today. It's nice to finally put some faces and names together for just amazing things about you all. But Sarah was my dead body friend. As morbid as that sounds, saying it out loud, that's how we described our friendship. That person you would call if you needed help. Knew they would show up, ask no questions, take care of business, and never speak of it again. # no judgment. Merrick knows that tradition continues with him, too. Sarah and I were going to grow old together in our retirement home with our golden retriever rescues and our Netflix crime shows. God, meanwhile, had other plans for Sarah. I was blessed to have met Sarah 25 years ago, our second semester at Westmont College, a small private Christian college in Santa Barbara, California, with 1,200 students. I was friend with her dorm mate, and the three of us ended up in the same Christian doctrine class after lunch. Sarah liked her naps, even back in college days, so I was the nominee to take notes in class if a nap took priority over attending class. Our friendship, you know what I'm talking about. That started way back then. Our friendship grew that semester as we began taking walks in the hills of Montecito before making it to the dining commons at 5 p.m. Those walks were where we discussed our past, discovering we had both lived in Virginia, growing up, and our goals and our futures. We wanted to start a company and call it Ashley Road Productions, named after the tree-lined road we would consistently walk with the alleged celebrities' homes in that neighborhood. Sarah was a sociology major and was an amazing writer, smart, and would delve into a subject matter and educate herself. I remember being in a cults class together. She needed it for her major, and mine was an elective. I learned more about cults than I care to remember because of Sarah and her wealth of information. It was my turn to take advantage of her notes. So sitting around our sophomore year, counting our units, we realized with some planning we could graduate in 3 years and start taking on the world. Sarah went to Israel over the summer, and I ended up going to Europe, but we picked back up where we left off. Sarah was that person you could count on if you wanted to go for a walk at random hours, wandering the campus, or go visit other dorms. Remember, this is a college, anything goes, but it's also a small Christian college, so not that much goes on. So we could always find something fun to do and to discuss. After college, Sarah was going to go into law enforcement, but again, God had another purpose for her. She also had a great sense of humor and was a prankster. We started giving each other gifts, but they had to be $5 or less, and the goofier the better. It is because of her I have a gnome collection and some unique magnets, like from her and Doug's adventures to the Spam Museum. After college, I ended up staying in Santa Barbara, and Sarah moved to Los Angeles, but she knew she always had a place to stay when coming up to visit, or vice versa, if I would visit her in Los Angeles, Virginia, or Minneapolis. We were always up for a good adventure, but also content binging the latest shows. We were big fans of random crime shows, and the ID channel was our jam. We would watch a show remotely so we could share commentary, especially the finale of Game of Thrones. She was a friend I would share streaming accounts with as well. I would trust Sarah's recommendations as we had similar humor and taste in what would keep our attention. Speaking of getting my attention, getting that phone call on Thanksgiving 11 years ago when Sarah, in tears, learning that she had been diagnosed with cancer, and then again last December, 9 years later, learning that the cancer had spread, are moments I will never forget. But as mentioned, God had a purpose for Sarah. She did not let her diagnosis stop her from living her best life and having an amazing impact, which is viewed today. Going through at least 179 rounds of chemo, that girl was a fighter. She took her love of learning and educated herself about colon cancer, treatments, and what it was like to live and parent with cancer. Working for the Colon Cancer Coalition is where she found her passion. Telling her story and experiences of what it was like to go through a particular treatment, she did not leave any detail out. Even through our college days, Sarah was very open and would tell it like it is. I miss my friend, but her legacy and message lives on. I don't look at those poop emojis the same. How many interviews has she given and would always lecture on blood in the stool is not normal. Go get it checked out, and don't be afraid to get a second opinion. Just two of the many, many lessons learned from Sarah DeBord. Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie. The next person who fills in a piece of Sarah's life is Lisa White. She basically, with her husband Jeffrey, met Sarah when she kind of separated from me and Connie in our home to go out and kind of find her own place, her own self. And I got her hooked up with a friend of mine who kind of became her counselor type person. And I knew she was okay because while my friend never discussed what was going on, she would always say, she's fine. She's doing what she needs to do. She's okay, don't worry. And I didn't. She ended up babysitting, and I think my friend got her hooked up with Lisa and Jeffrey. But they owned a production company. In California terms, that means their company went around and found locations for movies, TVs, commercials, or whatever else, photo shoots. And so Sarah, fairly fresh out of college, suddenly found a job she loved. She bought a pickup, she had a dog, and she and the dog would travel all over Southern California looking for whatever producer wanted. We need a 1958 gas station in the middle of the desert. She would go find it. And so her connection with Lisa and Jeffrey started as a babysitter, grew into an employee, and eventually, within a very short time, she just moved in with them. They had two boys, which were a handful, and Sarah kind of moved in, became a member of the family, and has still to this death been that person in Sarah's life. Jeffrey died about a year before Sarah did, and he died of lung cancer, so the two of them reminded me of two ladies I met in the hospital once when I was a hospital chaplain, Mrs. Parker and Mrs. Sloan. They both had cancer. I visited them at different times. Then you had to go to the hospital and stay in the hospital for chemo. And one time they just happened to be in the same room. And I remember thinking that they had concerned understanding and understanding concern for each other. They knew what the other person was going through without even talking about it. That was Lisa and Jeffrey. They both knew they had a terminal illness, and that made their connection even stronger. So we asked Lisa to come here to talk about that time, to fill in college to marriage. And so this is how she described that time in her words. How do I begin to describe my girl, the one who quietly slipped into my life and took up residence in my heart permanently? I just want to talk with you for a moment and reminisce, to remember some of the chapters of life we wrote together. Chapters with me and Jeffrey, Jordan, and Logan. That's the two sons. You were a piece of a puzzle missing in my heart and in our family, an unpredictable yet perfect gift. As I would cook, you would doodle with your favorite art markers. I have your doodles all over my recipes in my recipe book. You left your mark. At our nightly dinner table, you always lit the candles. And one night you laughed right out loud with your mouth wide open to reveal the piercing in your tongue. You cheeky young woman, it had been there for months, and I never knew. I didn't either. Little did I know that you were taking young Jordan and Logan to the tattoo shop to switch out your tongue stud. So the question begs, is that why Logan has so much ink on his body today? Probably. There was that time I waited up late into the night for you to come home. You were on a date and rode off on the back of a motorcycle. It wasn't the guy I worried about, it was the motorcycle. I just needed to know you were okay. And then that Easter, my in-laws were here from England. We heated the pool to swim, and some little animals managed to fall in and die. You fished them all out for me and buried them without a flinch. Swimming carried on. The Brits never knew. I was able to see you grow, flourish, and launch. What a gift to my heart. You arrived a little rosebud, so tightly wrapped up, and left home as a beautiful bloom. We got you a cat for company when you moved into your first apartment in Burbank. That cat, we all agreed, must have been demon-possessed. In the end, a really bad idea. I think you gave him to a trucker who had to drop the poor thing off somewhere in the middle of Texas. You joined our company and learned our trade, location scouting. That is how you met Kyle. Looking for a location, you found your guy, and on his job site with his hard hat hanging behind him. You and Kyle brought two incredible gifts into this world, Merrick and Lachlan. And that's why when that fateful day came and the doctors finally understood what you'd been trying to tell them for so long, you put on your warrior suit. You fought, you refused to give in, you defied all odds. You dove into the sea of, how can I stay alive to see my boys grow up, even if just to see them graduate kindergarten? You were still nursing Lachlan at the time. You dueled with Jeffrey when he was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer almost exactly a year after you were diagnosed. Is your stage 4A or 4B? Mine is 4B, what Jeffrey would say. I still don't know how you did it, Sarah. Probably all of the stubbornness that ever existed inside you rose up and declared war. And what a war you waged. When we lost Jeffrey, you came, and just before he left, and then after. I know your staying power was bittersweet, but it was for Lachlan and Merrick that you stayed and fought. You and Leslie collected flowers for Jeffrey's funeral early one morning from cuttings throughout our neighborhood and stuffed them in Trader Joe bags. It was early before the neighbors were even awake to take notice. We all laughed. Jeffrey would have loved that. He had borrowed flowers at his funeral. And then we went to Cayman, the first of 3 trips for Merrick, and then Lachlan joined us on the last. We introduced your boys to those turquoise waters lapping the white sand beaches of the Caribbean, the sea turtles, stingrays, Kiki the nurse shark, the scuba diving, snorkeling, those pina coladas, Merrick's fab. We won't tell your parents, Merrick. We laughed that the mosquitoes that bit you had no idea the amount of chemo in your blood would surely slay them the moment they left you. You were with me that New Year's Eve and into a new year to meet the man I liked and then loved, the man I'm beginning my new chapter of life with this October. You will no doubt be there. I will look for you. And I was there when you were first meeting Doug, nearly the same time I met David. That's her new husband-to-be. Doug, the man who captured your heart and your affection, and when your biggest boy joined us on our last Cayman trip, he brought the party with him. This is the man that would be there to steady and carry you through the gates of leaving this life here on earth to the gates of your eternal destiny. When I think of you, Sarah, I think of life. I think of you pouring your life into others' lives. I think of wiry and witty, and I miss our pings back and forth. I think of the bud of insecurity that blossomed into a glorious bloom of strength, bravery, and courage, strongly forging a path of light through the shadow of death for others to be led and to take hope. But more than that, I think of your love for Merrick and Lachlan, A mom's love is a terrible and yet blessed curse. I know it consumed your heart. Their keepsake boxes that you put together for them, the notes and cards you left behind for them, something to always remind them of your love and passion over them. You, my sweet girl, have left us all a legacy, an inspiration, a doodle, an unfathomable strength to aspire to. You just left us way too soon. You and Jeffrey have reunited. Wish I could have seen that. You are finally released from your prison of pain, and it is well with your soul. The day will come when we will lock arms and pick up right where we left off. I know this. I know we'll be together. Jesus promised. You believed, and I believe. I now want to say Cato for now, and end with this, how you closed out your 1995 yearbook. Be in the world, but not of it. You are now out of this world and home. And then in French you wrote, I send you kisses with all my heart. Me too, my beautiful and brave, sweet girl. From my heart to yours always. And so that's Lisa's word to us today. Special lady, special relationship. I did not have any really concerns about Sarah during that period of her life because I knew she had a family and they loved her without reservation. Now we move to marriage and kids and cancer. So Kyle, take us where you want us to go.
I knew Sarah DeBord for 17 years. She was my wife and she was the mother of my children. I'm going to share 3 things with you that never changed, 3 things that did, and a little poem I wrote about her. What never changed? Her love of all things California, dogs, and she was fiercely independent. A person so independent decides to become their own oncologist. And as Doug can attest, isn't always the easiest person to care for. Towards the end, or it tore her up to need help. Towards the end of her journey, she was emaciated, she could barely breathe, even with the help of her oxygen machine. Walking across the room was too much to ask. I'd pop my head in every few hours and ask, you good? Need anything? What I don't need is a babysitter. For me, though, the more interesting question is about what did change about Sarah. The first thing was she wanted to be sexy when I met her, but ultimately she transcended the need to feel that way. There were tweezers all over our house. She was always on the hunt for that errant hair. She'd even attack me with them. In the years before her diagnosis, she'd also lament how big her butt was. She was hard on herself and never acknowledged all the physical beauty that she brought to the table. In her first entry of her blog, The Colon Cancer Chick, dated December 11th, 2011, she wrote, and I quote, "Boobs are sexy, right? Colons are not sexy, right? So therefore, it is safe for me to admit that I have colon cancer, the least sexy of the cancers. And by least sexy, I don't think I'll be slapping a blue ribbon magnet that says, quote, I survived colon cancer on my truck. And I'm not going to be wearing a colon cancer survivor shirt in any future races. It would totally take away from the sexy factor I've worked so hard to cultivate, you know? No amount of Victoria's Secret panties can make colon cancer hot. And as you all know, all you have to do is scroll through her social media feeds. And you'll see them slowly turn blue. And you'll see her lean harder and harder. Ugh. You know when your eyes get all watery and you can't see the words? That's happening to me. You'll see her lean harder and harder into colon cancer advocacy. I'm reminded of a verse from a Leonard Cohen song called Anthem. Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. A woman surrounded by tweezers one day decided to share her cracks with the world, and the light flooded in. And by cracks, I'm being quite literal. Her feet cracked, her hands cracked, her face bloodied by the treatments she endured. Like Sarah, I'm an advocate in the cancer community, and what I see in Sarah is something we don't see very often. Most cancer patients are adamant that their disease does not define them. It's a rallying call, a signal of strength. In my opinion, the path that Sarah chose took more courage. Sarah shouted from the mountaintops, yes, my disease does define me, just like everything else that happened to me does. And me sharing these brutal realities with the world might help one person out there feel a little less alone on their journey. It might just give one more person permission to feel weak in the face of unspeakable suffering. When the only thing the world is telling people impacted by cancer to do is harden, it might just give one person the permission they need to soften. The second thing I saw change about Sarah, she wanted to become a wife. She ultimately became herself. Sarah and I fought like cats and dogs on our wedding night. We even spent the night in separate rooms. That was an obvious omen that I somehow missed. The next 10 years were spent with Sarah living a lie, the lie that she was happy in our marriage. Everyone knows that the longer you tell a lie, the harder it gets to come clean. The deeper its roots get into you. The more courage it'll take to gain freedom from its grip. But Sarah was really holding on to all of that for everyone else's sake, for my sake, for my family's sake, for her children's sake. Then one day, she found the courage to come clean. I want a divorce, she told me. I've never been happy in our marriage. She shared she had lost herself soon after our marriage when she traded in her job for domestic duties. Her name changing bugged her. I'm Sarah DeBord, she told me. This was a decision that tormented her. It was a painful thing she had to do to become her authentic self. This was something she had to do to align what she was feeling on the inside with what she was showing the rest of the world. What Sarah knew before she died was that living her truth paid off. Was my pride wounded by that truth? Of course it was. Did our kids go through a confusing time because of that truth? Of course they did. What Sarah knew, though, before she died was that, but it was Sarah's courage that paved the way for me to find Allison, the love of my life. And that paved the way for Merrick and Lachlan to have a bonus mom in their lives who can help them navigate this lifelong challenge of losing their mom. And it paved the way for our boys to gain a bonus sister in Haley, bonus brothers in Oscar and Will, bonus grandparents in Tom and Pat and Angie and Kurt, and of course, a bonus Doug, too. But what matters most is that her courage paved the way for her to find her true self. Sarah would want you to find those opportunities in your life, too. Where in your life is there a gap between the stories you tell yourself and the stories you tell the world? What would it take for you to find the courage to live your truth out loud? Maybe it's a job you feel stuck in. Maybe it's that friend you secretly want nothing to do with. Maybe you've never told your parents you're afraid they aren't proud of you. Whatever it is, big or small, come clean. Do what Sarah did. Live your truth out loud. The third thing I saw change about Sarah, she wanted to become a mom. She became a mom to an entire community. Many may not know that Sarah and I had a lot of trouble conceiving. She did all the worrying, all the research, and I showed up for the fun part. And she always knew how to get me in the perfect mood. I'm ovulating. Get in here now. She'd holler at me from the bedroom. And then one day it happened. She was pregnant. And soon it was stillborn. I think this was among the darkest chapters of her life. One that very few people knew about. And then our miracle boy, Merrick, came along. He'd sleep on average 3 to 4 seconds every hour. I'd get home from work, and she'd hand him to me, and she would get in her car and drive to I have no idea where. Then Lachlan came along. He was awake 3 to 4 seconds per hour. Goopy, we called him, for his incessantly goopy eye. Now she had her babies. But then the damn diagnosis came. And that's when she doubled down on mommyhood. She endured unspeakable suffering. She gave up so much because if she had a choice, she was never, ever going to give up being a mom. I'm convinced that had we never had our boys, she would never have endured so much for so long. If I've ever seen love in action, that was it. Fast forward a good while into her colon cancer journey, and I'd find her, it seemed like, on a weekly basis, in tears, mourning the loss of another colon cancer loved one. Often another mom. She knew colon cancer moms everywhere. Australia, Austin, you name it. I'd warn her, I don't think it's feasible for you to know and love and care for and grieve every mom with colon cancer in this world. But within a week, another one would reach out. Sarah would take her under her wing like she always did. And so it went. She suffered loss after loss, and never once did she hesitate to love again. In my opinion, she became the matriarch of the metastatic early onset colon cancer community. Featured in the New York Times, her writing constantly published in Cure magazine. Which is why the news of her death shook the colon cancer community. So hard. She was unbeatable. She was their lighthouse. She was their harbor. She was their mom. And now a poem for Sarah. It's called Dog Pile. They had gathered by the fire on the beach in the evening, like they always do. Her Papa Mac, young again, her stillborn child, a teenager now, her colon cancer family, brimming with joy, her Uncle Joffrey, breathing easy, ever the life of the party, her Mad Dog, Coco, and Nixon, all tired from a long day playing in the sand. And her Hank, his neck fully healed from his accident, having forgiven Nixon for it, and tired from chasing tennis balls. But this evening was different, and they could all feel it. Sarah was on her way. Her arrival, much like they had all imagined. her tan arm hanging out the window of her brand new Land Cruiser, her lungs inhaling an ocean of sea air, her radio blasting the Beach Boys, her hair soft like a puppy's, messy from the salty breeze, her fat lefty leg, just like the right one once again. Her jaw and scalp tumors were barely scars now, looking badass. Her veins no longer coursing with chemo and cow rabies. Her tank top screaming the 2020 World Series Dodgers champions. She hopped out of the truck, and the instant her flip-flops hit the warm sand, her enormous electric blue eyes looked up at them, and they all came running. Hank got there first. He was the fastest, leaping up into her arms. Coco, Nixon, and Mac Dog were close behind, knocking her over. Uncle Jeffrey shouted, "Dog pile!" at the top of his cancer-free lungs, and everyone else leapt and wriggled into the growing mound. Her laughing uncontrollably at the bottom, feeling the massive weight of all their love. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Y'all want to stand up and take a stretch? We're getting toward the end, but don't want anybody to get bored or fall asleep. Although, if you fall asleep, it's okay, because one of my deacons told me once, if he fell asleep on me when I was preaching, it was because he had listened to me for a while and he felt like he could trust me. So he was going on back to sleep so I could just keep on going. The Colon Cancer Coalition was something I'd never heard about until I met Sarah getting involved in them and meeting the people who ran it. A great organization. I saw Sarah in action. She actually arranged to come to Charlottesville or Newport News so we could go participate in her race, not running, but helping. And I watched her grow from being, almost, I think she started as a volunteer, became part-time, and grew into a full-time person, a very intimate. I was her dad, but I had no concept of her impact. I thought it was just something she did to help because she had colon cancer. As Kyle mentioned, Sarah lived a very public cancer experience. It was in her blog. She talked about it. She lectured on it. She held back nothing. I still remember on, I'm not a Facebook person, but it was Face Day on Facebook, I think. And everybody was encouraged, put your face on Facebook. Let people see what you look like. Well, it just so happened at that point, Sarah was having a severe reaction to chemotherapy, and her face looked like somebody had taken a hammer to it. It was all red and rashes, and you would say she looked terrible. But she put her face like that on Facebook because that's who she is. She was not ashamed of what the cancer medicine did to her. She didn't want it. She didn't like it. But she wasn't afraid to show it. That was her whole life. When it came to choosing to stop treatment, it became a very different situation because where she had lived her cancer in public, she did not want her death to be public. She wanted to be private with family, only family and friends. I commend the coalition because they covered for her. They lied for her. They let nobody know that she was in hospice care, which, if you don't know, is basically helping you die. There's no treatment. It's just pain control, making you comfortable. People would call to talk to her, and they would say, she's not available right now. Can I take a message? They just, for 9 months, I guess, they kept, or 3 months, nobody knew. That's why, as Kyle mentioned, it was such a shock to the colon community because nobody knew she was in hospice. And it was partly for some personal reasons, not wanting other persons to benefit from it, but it was also because she'd been public as long as she could be. She now needed to be private. And so it was the coalition that not only did that, but they did an incredible thing, which in my eyes, it was an act of God blessing Sarah, because they were getting some new insurances and things. And they actually, if you can believe this, you know what insurance companies are like. They want every reason they can find not to give you a policy, at least not at a reasonable price. They got her a $100,000 life insurance policy, no conditions, 30 days before she died. They did that. And so it was those girls in the back, let's give them a hand. That was quite a remarkable thing. And it let Sarah die with the awareness that there would be money to pay her bills, because she felt bad that she hadn't been able to pay all her medical bills, and that there would be money to pass along to help with the boys as well. So with that, Aaron is going to come and share about Sarah, the colon cancer advocate, because that's what she became.
So I think Kyle had the right idea with the sunglasses. Sarah asked me, "Are you going to be okay to do this?" Because she knows me, she knew me too well. I said, "Yes, I can." So we'll see how this goes. But I can't. Everything I wanted to say has kind of been covered by others, but I wanted to tell a few stories and then talk about what she taught me. From the moment I met her at a dinner for colon cancer patients and their families, and chatting with her after, chatting with Kyle and Kim, I knew that this woman was something special. That she was more than a California girl, more than her pixie cut, more than a blog that told it like it was. She was truly something special. And there was something about her that said, there is more to this, and we need to tap it, and we need to figure it out. And when the time came for hiring someone to help with social media and to talk about colon cancer and really get the word out, there was no one else that I wanted. And the way I remember it, and Anne's on Zoom, so she can't dispute me on this, is I said, I want to hire Sarah DeBord. I want to make a job description that's going to fit what she does, and I want to bring her on. And Sarah, I don't think to the day she died, believed me that there wasn't another candidate. There was something about this girl that made people want to listen, and she had this way of talking about it and way of bringing it forward that really presented things in different ways. And we learned that she was more than her first impressions, and we learned that she was fierce. And she and I were a good match. We leveled each other out. I brought her energy level down some, and she taught me to fight. She taught me how to raise the bar, and we were able to get a lot done. She was fierce. She was fierce about living. I don't think I know anyone who has truly lived as much life as Sarah lived in the years that I knew her. She lived more in her 43 years than most people that I know that are in their 80s. Talking about learning to live a life when you're diagnosed with cancer, that was Sarah. Traveling to a new place, getting on a plane. I need to get my miles. How am I going to get my miles this year? I need to, take a trip here. She really figured out how to do that. She was fierce. She was fierce for patients, always helping, more than I knew. I didn't know that when she went home at night, she was still talking to patients on Facebook or still texting with other people. She didn't share that part of us. She had that opportunity with the Colon Cancer Coalition to do that as part of her job, and she took that personally, and she made that decision, and she made that effort to become kind of the matriarch that Kyle talked about, the person that could help use her knowledge that she had taught herself, being her own oncologist, to help other people. She was an advocate for patients in more ways than one. I remember she was going to sit on a panel at a conference with a bunch of physicians, and she had received their slides and didn't like what they were going to say. So she changed it and said, nope, this is now a panel discussion. This is what we're going to talk about. And they all went, Okay. And it was the best discussion of the entire conference because Sarah said, no, this is not what patients need. This is not what patients want to hear. We need to talk about this so that patients can learn and have a better life from this. Sarah was fiercely loyal. She taught me that other people's crap doesn't have to be my crap, that I can rise above it, that I can live in the moment. She taught me how to have fun. She was fiercely humorous. I don't know that I've ever seen anyone take as many selfies, other than maybe one sitting back there. I think she may have learned it from you, maybe not. But to find time to find the joy in the mundane, to find the joy in the tedious, the traveling that we did together, her sitting on an airplane, Snapchatting someone with a silly selfie, or finding ways to just make other people find the joy in life was one of her gifts. And she was fierce. She was fierce about her kids. She loved you guys. And everything she did for the coalition as a cancer advocate was so that there would not be so that there will not be other kids that struggle through the same things that you guys have. Your mother was incredible. I have never known someone so fiercely loving of their children. And she fiercely shared her entire journey until it was time to circle the wagons. And then she fiercely gave everything she could to her family until the very end. And so she taught me how to be fierce. And just want to echo what Kyle said in terms of living that life. And that was her biggest gift, and the biggest thing that I take away from knowing Sarah is being that authentic person. Because that's who she was, and she never hid it, and she was always proud of who she was.
I'll illustrate that characteristic. After Sarah died, we waited 2 or 3 days before we made a public announcement because we knew how it was going to rock the colon cancer world because nobody knew she was dying. And Doug fielded lots of emails and things like that as we were trying to wrap up, get some sense of order, what he and I were supposed to do. And the interesting thing was that, I remember it was a phone call or an email, I don't remember, but this one guy said, I only met Sarah once. I stopped her walking down a sidewalk. I talked to her for 3 minutes. She told me some things that changed my life, and I'm alive today because of that. So that was Sarah. That was the advocate. Also, I don't know if there's a picture back there, but I have one on my photo list of Sarah walking down a mall, and she has these big rubber or plastic cheeks on her butt. And they were doing a colon cancer awareness. And she said the neat thing was the old guys liked to pat her on the butt when she was wearing that thing. So she'd do anything. She was crazy. Our last person to talk is appropriately last because he was the person who shared the most of her life for the last 2 years. I met Doug first on FaceTime with Sarah when he stuck his head in and said hi. And then more when I came to visit her and I watched him for the last 3 months of her life. He was the constant companion. He put everything he was doing aside. He's a lawyer. He continued to work, but off of her kitchen table. And 24/7, he took care of her and the 2 boys when Allison and Kyle were not needed to. Eventually he took over the total care of just her by herself as the boys transitioned to their home. And I got to watch him do everything that a caretaker does that nobody wants to talk about, from holding her, from rubbing her, to giving her shots of ever-increasing levels of morphine to stop the pain, and to giving her bath and changing her potty beside the bed. Anything that a person does out of love, he did. And so I honor him by letting him be last and share what he wants to share of his last 2 years. I did see an email one day. I thought it was the weirdest thing. Sarah was standing on some remote-looking place. I had no clue where it was. It was in the middle of the summer. It was titled with the name of 4 islands. I Googled the islands, and he had taken my daughter, or she had taken him, I'm not sure which. But they went to this group of islands halfway between Iceland and Russia. And that was so much them. Their goal was to pack as much fun and adventure as they could, and they even have pictures of them diving into Arctic cold water in these big emergency suits. So, Doug, come and share whatever you want to.
The islands were halfway between Iceland and Ireland. The Faroe Islands. And those emergency suits were scuba diving in the with the continental plates separate. It's in Iceland, and so you can go. It's the clearest water on Earth, and you can go diving. And so that was Sarah's with her trips to Cayman. She researched that. She knew that was out there, and she wanted to do that. So that was something that we did do in Iceland. First, thank you all for coming. It means so much. It's been so hard to hold it off doing this for a year. And it wasn't only until this year, after New Year's, Aaron and I were talking, don't you think it's about time, or we need to think about doing something? COVID's been so hard to get everybody together because of that. And, after Sarah passed, Sarah was like, I really don't care what you do. And I can be a pretty private guy. And I'm like, you know what? We don't need to do anything. COVID is preventing. Yes, I know, Janet. So I really didn't think too much about holding this. But then as time went by, I realized that, this is for us. We all need this. So glad that we're able to do this. People who are here in person, thank you for traveling, and those of you online, thank you for watching. As Aaron said, so many of you, I've heard so many of the things that I was going to say have already been said. Her love of the color black, her love of dogs. Quick thing about black, when we love to travel, that was just what we did. It wasn't like we saw any kind of clock ticking down. We just always wanted to go out and travel adventures. And as you might suspect, Sarah had these things in mind long before, or the destinations planned long before she had me convinced that that's where we needed to go next. So I learned of the Faroe Islands. I had never even heard of them before I met her, but before you knew it, I'm like, I'm all in. I've researched it after you showed me these things. And she just planted little crumbs, and I just, blindly, and didn't know I was being led down a path, but she led me down it anyways. And she had our next 4 or 5 trips already planned out. Svalbard, the northernmost tip in Norway. And I'm going to go to all these places just because I was going to, I learned through Sarah that I was going to go to these places anyways, and I still plan to do so. Svalbard, Norway, Greenland. Those are the next 2 places. So yeah. Oh, the point of that was, with her, fondness for selfies and social media, I'm like, you need to add a little color, a little pop to your photos. And I took her to REI, I don't know how many times, and online, I'd send her links to just, here's something that's not black. What do you think? And she's like, no, I'm sorry. I think in some of those photos, we settled on a light gray, to add some pop to her photos, but like a bite, I'm like a cherry red down puffy. No, it just wasn't going to happen. So yeah, her love of black, and Leslie was mentioning, adventures, the trip to Israel. Little Sarah fun fact: she's got Harvard. That was through Harvard. She has Harvard credits on her college resume. Who else has Harvard credits on her college resume? Does it surprise you Sarah has Harvard credits on her resume? No, it should not. And it was the fact that she loved to trot out every once in a while when she thought I was being a little pompous about my educational background. Do you have Harvard credits on your resume, Doug? I didn't think so. So, and you talk about dogs, Mad Dog and Hank and all these other dogs, I had a dog Tahoe, and, just best dog ever. So we learned of each other's fondness for dogs, and we're like, okay, we're going to get a dog. And we had planned to get a dog, just, everything just happened. But that didn't mean Sarah didn't stop planning to having a dog. So we were bouncing around names. And so, I'd bounce out some names, she'd bounce out some, she eventually was like, Watson. I'm like, I'm not so sure. But again, she dropped down the clumps, led me down the path, and pretty soon I'm totally sold on the dog's name. It should be Watson. So I'm happy to say that just this last week, Watson was born. It was a kennel about an hour away, northwest from here, and we're going to pick him up on August 31st. So me and the boys are pretty excited about Watson. So Watson's on the way. Now going into the thoughts that I was going to, had it kind of planned out in my mind before I walked up here. You don't remember that book, Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? It starts out, think about this moment when people gather and talk about you. What do you want them to say? And what do you want that day to look like, and how it's going to go? And then work back from that. I think all the outpouring on social media from the colorectal cancer community and just everyone here and everything else that we've seen, just tells you that she got it right. But she got it right not because she read the book. That's just how she lived her life. It was all organic. And, we talked a lot about, building brands on social media because we saw so many people in the cancer community working on that, and just social media in general, not just the cancer community. And we always talked about, it being forced versus things being organic. And so much of what Sarah did was organic. Everything in the colorectal cancer community, the notoriety she got, the writing she did, it just came from stuff that she wanted to do, that she felt she needed to do, and was, not entirely forced. If you look back at her tweets, and there's a lot of planning there. She was very good at laying things out and saying a good message, but a lot of it was organic, and she built up her reputation just by being her. And I think one of the saddest things about seeing her pass so early is just that the world was deprived of, to me, she was like just on the cusp of really, making a national impact. She was working on a book about cancer and parenting, and, giving her writing talents, it would have been something else. I think David had a family member. She had an agent. There was a contract that was being passed back and forth, and he got the kind of the abstract of what was it, and he's like, I'm in. This is great. This would be a wonderful book. We'd love to promote it. So we had plans of her doing the morning talk show circuit after her book had become a national bestseller. I'd quit my job. I'd just carry her bags and, just take care of her schedule, and she could plan all the trips, and I'd just come along. So it was too bad that I didn't get to do that. But I'm going to try and write a book. I have some notes. It won't be anything near what she would do. But, it's funny with the writing. People are wired for different things. Everyone's got their skills. And Sarah was wired for being an excellent writer. And I did some writing for the Colon Club, little bios for, it's one of many organizations in the CRC community, and one of the things they do is this calendar, and they bring 12 people out, and they do a photo shoot, make it feel like, it's their kind of like rock star weekend, right? So they need little bios written, and I would write bios every year for a few of them. And for an engineer, creative writing is like pulling teeth. It's just impossible. I can get there, but it takes me forever. So Sarah would see me, I would set aside multiple weekends to write one of these, maybe 850 words. And Sarah would just look at that, she's like, I could do that in an hour. And I'm like, no, I need to do this.
I know what that means.
Yes, Siri.
Mike, I can't search the web for.
That's really funny. She could write that for me in an hour, and I'm like, no, I need to do it. I need to suffer through it. So it was, and she could. She would tell me the stories of when she was in college, and she'd go down to Justin, another member of the family, and who was at college. I forget where he went, but she'd visit him, hang out for the weekend, and in between, whatever they were doing, she'd just bang out all of his term papers. It didn't matter what class it was or the subject matter, because it just flowed from her, like you and I having a conversation. So it was an amazing talent, and it was great to see, even though it could be frustrating when you watched it. Although I got it back, I would get back at her when we would play cribbage, because to try and see her count up her hand was like me trying to write those bios, 15-2, 15-4. I'm like, you've got 12. Let's just go, next hand. Let me do what I can do. You can do what you can do. I'll count your hand and we can move on, all right? So yeah, the writing, it was amazing. And it was just one part of why I love Sarah. When I first met her, it was December 3rd, 2016, and I didn't know I was a marked man at the time, but apparently, according to her coworkers, this was kind of planned. And I'm just, again, crumbs, I'm just blindly following down the path into the trap that she had set. But so she flew into Portland, and we were driving down to Eugene, I don't know, hour and a half, 2-hour drive south, and we stopped at a bar along the way to get some lunch. And, first time I really got to engage with her, and I was, within 10 minutes of just this beautiful, intelligent, smart, witty, feisty, just interesting woman, and I am just, I'm interested. I'm very interested. So a lot of lively banter back and forth. And our friend Dan, who was in the car, he drove in the front on the way down. I was in the back. Sarah was in the front. And he's like, I'll sit in the back on the way home. I can see what's going on here. And he was sending Sarah texts during that lunch where he's like, I feel like a third wheel. And he's got a picture on the way back. He's in the back seat, and we're just blah, blah, blah. And he's like, future lovebirds. So it was pretty apparent. So yeah, it was we almost said stay interesting more than I love you, because that's what we liked about each other was, she was just, there was always another layer, some, nook and cranny about her personality or about her background that I would find years after knowing her that I just loved, hearing from Jane. Oh, her viola teacher was first chair at the, Virginia Philharmonic or whatever. And, he said she could have been a professional musician had she cared. And Sarah would love telling me the stories where, I just waltz in and these kids whose parents have been, threw a viola at them when they were who knows how old and private lessons forever, and she just walk in and just take over first chair. Drove those kids and their mothers nuts. But that's just hidden talents. And then ballet, apparently she was a dancer, yeah? Yeah, who knew? I didn't know. I learned this a few months before she passed. So there was always something, and I was so looking forward to spending the rest of my life to discover and learn and just all about her. And just her curiosity about the world. The fact that, we were all about experiences over things for the most part, and she's like, one year I gave her a subscription to the New York Times, and she's like, that is the best gift I've ever gotten, because it's just an endless opportunity to continue to learn about anything in the world. So that was wonderful. I'm not going to go too much into what everyone else has said about her impact in the community. I mean, gosh, how can I just reiterate everything that Kyle said about her being the matriarch of the newly diagnosed mothers, often with really young kids with colorectal cancer. I saw her connect with these people, and on evenings and weekends, and I just asked her, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I'm messaging so and so." It was her thing. Again, it was organic. She just felt so much for these people, and when they passed, it was very upsetting to her. But she just cared so much for others, and you could see that in the social media comments in response to the multiple notices of her passing, about how she just made everybody feel welcome and loved. And really, I mean, so to turn to Merrick and Lachlan here, there's one last post that I'm going to post before the weekend's over. I came across it on her computer after she passed. It's called The Long, Slow Death. Writing was very cathartic for her, and she wrote this probably February or March before she passed, in which, you know, she's just getting her thoughts out about taking my armor off and everything. But I won't say too much more about it because she can say it better than I can, but I will share this one snippet from it because it's about the boys. You know, she said, though I'm not actively dying, it's inevitable that I will probably die much sooner than I ever would have hoped. As a parent, it is just as heartbreaking as I imagine it would be, and the thought of leaving my boys the cause of my near constant tears. She just loved you guys so much. You know, she said to me multiple times, you know, Merrick, she's just she was envious almost of your talents, you know. Merrick's like, what? You know, Merrick's, you know, he just picked up the trombone, and Kyle and I could tell after about a year, and he's pretty good. He's got his mom's talent, musical talent, but Merrick's a talented. He's at drawing, and he's a whiz in science and math and everything. And Sarah said multiple times to me, you know, what if the only reason that Kyle and I got together was to create this kid who's going to go off and do something amazing? So first of all, no pressure. But second, you know, she just was in awe and loved you both for, you know, what you might contribute to the world. And Lachlan, you know, you're just the most loving kid in the world. I'd walk you into school every now and then. I could see everyone. Sarah would notice, comment to me, everyone, like, as a third grader, he was in the school, 1st through 5th grades, and kids, you know, 4th and 5th grade. What's up, Lachlan? What's up? And he's like, you know, hey. I mean, everybody just knows him. Everybody just loves the kid. He's just got the innate soft skills that are going to carry him far, and he's going to do great things as well. Probably as a curator of a World War II tank museum, but nothing wrong with that. World War II tanks need love too. So, you know, Merrick and Lachlan, you know, you got a whole army of village people here. Just want nothing but the best for you, and we all love you to death, but none of that replaces a mom's love, but we'll do the best we can. That's all I've got.
We're going to kind of begin winding down, but while Doug is here, he's been kind of, from the very beginning, the spearhead of today. And he's the one who's been connecting everybody and doing things and calling people and getting people to do stuff. So before you sit down, would you just kind of name kind of the core group of people who...
Yeah. I wanted to thank Aaron Peterson and Leslie Schinkel. The three of us kind of spearheaded this, the organizing of this, but that's just a small, you know, there's so many other people. Anna Dahlgren put the slideshow together. Dennis got us connected here with Jeremy, who's doing a great job with the streaming service. Apologies if I'm forgetting folks. All the people who sent us photos, that was great. You know, I just loved seeing the photos from Phases of Her Life that I had seen before. And little video snippets. Dennis has been great about sending me snippets out throughout the year because I don't have these things. You know, it's great. Just photos are one thing and selfies and social media, but even a little 5-second video snippet of someone you loved who is gone, and it's, to me, it's like another way of interacting with that person, just a little bit more, and living with them for another second. And so I think it's great. Another reason why it's so great we're all sharing our stories is because no one person has gotten to see or hear everything Sarah has said or everything that she did. I mean, it's for the best, but it's great. So thank you to everyone to helped out and everyone who came out early and helped set up. And so afterwards, we're all heading to, there's going to be an informal gathering at Radisson Blue, which is not too far away. It's there's a bar, restaurant on the second floor. It's going to the bar section. It's called Fire Lake. We'll be there, and if we're not there, text me. We might be somewhere else nearby, and let's kind of hang out and keep telling stories. Yeah, thanks.
One of the best guys I ever met because of the way he cared and loved my daughter. So good job. We're going to wind down. We've got to be out of here by 5. We're going to close with a special kind of an awareness. Sarah told me, and some of you would know this, that in the last few weeks before she died. I think she told me about a month before I even went to see her that she had found a lot of time in the middle of the night. She couldn't sleep. Her sleep was all screwed up because of the drugs and stuff. And she'd be awake, she would be in pain, and she would be alone. And she told me that she had started reverting back to the hymns that she knew as a child. Now, she grew up, I was a pastor half of my adult life, so all of her life, until she went off to college, I was as a pastor or a staff member. And so, because in her wandering away, church became less important. I never doubted that she still had her faith in Christ, and she knew she was going to heaven. That was never a question in her mind. But I wasn't seeing the evidence of it. So it was a real comfort when she just told me one night on the phone that she had had a couple of dreams about heaven, and that they were very real, and that they were very pointed, and that they had given her a total peace about dying and a total peace about what would happen after she died. The first dream was she and Jeffrey were skin diving in the Cayman Islands. And she said, we were just like floating over a beautiful reef, and we were seeing the most beautiful stuff. She said, and it was so peaceful there. And they were just enjoying it. And she said, and Jeff said, we need to go get Lisa. Lisa needs to see this. So she said they surfaced from the floating over the reef, like you do there. And they came up out of the water, and Lisa was there, but she was like on the other side of a bank. Maybe they were out in the water, she was on the shore. And they were calling to her that they wanted her to come join them so she could see that. And it was like she just couldn't hear them. She was ignoring them. And then Jeffrey said, oh yeah, that's right. She can't hear us. So let's go back. So she said they went back to where they were. And she suddenly realized, and it was such a peaceful place. It was just a peacefulness about it. And that came over her. And she said she realized that what was happening was she realized they didn't have on tanks or masks or snorkels or flippers. They were just floating underwater over this reef, seeing the beauty of it. And she said, I think God was showing me this is what heaven is like. And she said, I have a total peace about dying. And she said, kind of mimicking that story that Doug said he wants to share with us, I think I have a copy of that. I had found it somewhere. But she said, dying is tough because you want to die. I want to die. I'm ready to die, but my body won't let me because the body isn't willing to quit yet. It keeps fighting. And so that was one of the comments she said, but because of that dream, I realized that heaven is a beautiful place that I'm going to. And so I'm peaceful now about dying. I'm ready to go. And I know it's going to be peaceful there. And then she added, and Papaw Mac, who's my father, who loved her, and she loved him. And she said, Papaw Mac would be there waiting for me. And so she was totally at peace about that. The second dream was, she didn't go into a lot of detail, Kyle, but it was about that stillborn baby. And she met that baby, and something transferred there that she didn't really need to talk about. But that was another of one of those plus things, that heaven is good. It's where I'm going, and I'm not afraid to go. I'm ready to go. I've done all I can do. My body's tired. I can't fight anymore. And when she first told me, she said, I'm done, I said, it's okay. I'm going to give you permission as your dad. You can quit fighting. You've earned your rest. And so that was one of the things that was a comfort. She really was at peace when she died. And the other thing that was a comfort to me as her dad was that while she was raised very involved in church and activities and her personal spiritual life, there was no doubt she was a Christian. and knew that Jesus had died for her and that she was going to heaven when she died. The other thing was, in those last months of her suffering, it was the hymns of her childhood that she turned to. That's where her comfort came, not from country music or pop music or whatever she listened to, but at night she would do these long playlists of hymns. And she told me that her favorite hymn was entitled, "It Is Well With My Soul." And if you've been around church very long, I mean, at least in the past, not so much now, and it's not so much old hymns, but you would know that song. And I asked her, I said, do you know the story of the song? Why, who wrote it, why it was written? And she didn't. And so I told her the story. It was written by a man, and I forget his name. It was like, not Sturgeon, but close to that. But it was like 1871 or whenever the Great Chicago Fire was. That he'd been a lawyer, a landowner, very wealthy, and he had a wife and 5 children. And the Great Chicago came, and the whole of Chicago burned. It was burned to the ground. He lost all his wealth, all his property, everything. And then, shortly after the fire, his only son died of some kind of fever that was, going around like plague. And so, with that loss of their livelihood, their wealth, their son, he felt the family needed a vacation, and so he had some business to attend to, and he put his wife and 4 daughters on a ship to send them to England to get away from all that they had been going through. Well, as it would happen, on the way to England, the ship collided with another ship in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, sunk, and all 4 children were killed. They drowned. And I forget the quote. I won't bother going and get it off my paper, but the first telegram from his wife was something like, "They're all gone. What am I to do?" And so, all of us who are parents, you can't imagine the grief, the loss. And so, a couple of weeks later, he was already scheduled to go to England, so he got going that way. And as they went through the area, the captain knew what had happened. He knew where they were, and he called him on deck, and he said, "This is the area where your family's ship went down." And so the mass hurt of that would be enough to crush any of us. But at that time, he sat down and he penned the words to the song, "It Is Well With My Soul." And in your brochure that Doug so beautifully prepared for us are the words to that song. And one of the things I'd like to do is to kind of close out our time together. Thank you for being here and everybody who's been such a part of Sarah's life. And I heard what Kyle was saying. It was the whole idea that Sarah had to take a huge leap to find her true self. It was a very powerful thing for him to admit. But if you know anything about Jackson, the ministry he's involved in, suddenly now sharing his feelings as a caregiver are not so foreign to him or negative as they were at one time. But in being honest like that, it impressed me that we all try to find our real self. Everybody's out trying to find themselves. Well, that was kind of what happened for Sarah. She had to take a big leap to find her true self, to find what she was supposed to do. And so, as Kyle said, maybe the whole purpose of them being married was to have these 2 kids and what they're going to do. They might change the world. Who knows? But I would think also that almost had to happen because having kind of found who she was and what she was really about, released her to be that, and the energy that comes with it, and the blessing of God releasing gifts in the person. And I think while that was a loss and a tragedy, it was also the beginning of a miracle. Because I've come to believe, because of the reaction to Sarah's death after the fact, that I didn't know this. I mean, I knew what she was doing, but I didn't know the intimate details like the coalition ladies do. Sarah touched thousands of people in encouragement and probably saved as many lives. She told me after the article was in the New York Times Magazine that a lady called her and said, my daughter, I think she was 21 or 22, has the same symptoms you had, and we're going to the doctor tomorrow. Probably saved that girl's life. And the other countless people who gave testimony of what Sarah had done to help them or to make a difference in their life. And so maybe she had to find her true self, because that was the mission that God had for her, or at least he took a good thing out of a bad thing. And the good thing was the years of her life with the Colon Cancer Coalition. So I wanted us to close just kind of in a thoughtful moment. I hope you know the joy that she knew, the security she had, that you know Christ is your Savior, and you know when you die you're going to go to heaven. If not, maybe that's part of what today's about, to start you on that journey. But I want us to just close. I've asked Jeremy, who's done such a great job for us, to play the song that was Sarah's favorite hymn, and it is Well With My Soul, and it's by a female singer who I never can remember the name of, but we found it. And I wanted to play, it's about 3 verses long, I think, but just listen to the words and remember the guy who wrote those words had lost all his possessions, his wealth, 4 daughters. I think they had a couple more sons in England after that, or they lost a son, 4 daughters, and I think they lost at least one of the children in England. And so with all that loss, he still could write the words and say, it's well with my soul. So let's just, Jeremy, if you'll get that rolling.
Peace like a river attendeth my way. When sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot thou hast taught me to say, it is well,
Let's pray together. Father, we're grateful that Sarah could claim that song and its truth and its message. And she is with you now, her body restored, her family restored, who are there waiting for her. Lord, I thank you that I can look forward to the day when I can jump on the dog pile and be with her again. And Lord, I just bless each one whose life she touched. She is gone, but she is still here to inspire us to be our best person. For those involved in the coalition and other kinds of ministries, to pour out their lives to do what she did, to heal the sick, to nurture, to love. And so, Lord, we just bless this time. We bless all that are a part of it, all who traveled, who are here, others joining by the live stream. And we just pray that your blessing would go out on each and every one of us. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for being here. Feel free to linger. We're good till 5 o'clock. Thank you.